Hello, America. Tonight I want to talk to you about dangerous ideas and irresponsible rhetoric and the violent consequences that they ultimately lead to. Tonight is something that I have wanted to present to you for 3 or 4 years, but I wanted to wait until we had somebody on the ground that we trusted who knew the situation and could tell the difference between the alt-right lies and the left lies and help us with the truth. In Romeo and Juliet, Friar Lawrence sums it up, and he says, "These violent delights have violent ends." What was so obvious to William Shakespeare back in the late 1500s would go ignored all throughout history from people like Karl Marx and Joseph Stalin and Mao, and now the current American left. I told you at one point they were so hungry they couldn't wait to rip their masks off and tell you exactly who they were. I said that in 2008. They were Marxist, I said. Well, we see their zeal for Marxism now. There are consequences for pointing fingers and saying, you are owed something, you're being held back, and they are to blame. Now go take it. What do you expect would happen if all you do is talk revolution? Isn't that what we should expect to happen? Their violent delights do indeed have violent ends, and we have a modern-day example of our frightening future going on right now. You don't need to look further than South Africa. It is the perfect example of the dangerous consequences for irresponsible, radical, Marxist, leftist ideas. I have stayed away from South Africa and didn't talk about it for 3 years because I want to make sure we have the whole story. Imagine telling what's happening in America and not really knowing all the ins and outs. It's very difficult to verify anything that is going on, but we will show you tonight government officials that will verify. It was true that white farmers were being killed at the time, 3-4 years ago. But they're not the only ones being killed. Depending on which source you looked at, the reasons for why were radically different. Then the alt-right took up the story, and the rest of the global media used their involvement to shut down any kind of discussion. The alt-right was a patsy. I mean, it was really easy to do it. Both sides used terms like white genocide and effectively ended any and all rational conversation on what was really happening in the country. Well, I refuse to allow the alt-right morons to dictate what we can or cannot talk about, nor will I cower from mainstream media when they try to lump anyone who tries to talk the truth about what's happening in South Africa and what is coming here, lump us in with racist nut jobs. And that's exactly what they do. In 2018, you had Tucker Carlson. He did a show on South Africa's land expropriation and the plans that they had back then and how that was fueling violent attacks on farmers. Well, you can guess what followed. A media firestorm blasted Tucker for promoting a white nationalist conspiracy theory. The words white genocide began popping up all over the place. The reaction was very, very effective, shutting down any and all talk about the root cause of the violence happening in South Africa. And by the way, yes, white farmers are being killed even today, and maybe even more today, in South Africa. However, that's not the story. I'm going to show you some incredibly disturbing images later in the show. You decide if these attacks are normal, because there's a lot more going on here. And that is why the left doesn't want anyone talking about this. So why is this topic scary for the left? Violent delights have violent ends. There are consequences for radical ideas and policies. You just take a look here at home. It's now been a few years since the radical left took off their masks and began saying out in the open what they used to only say in private. I hate America. America is a horrible place. It has to be destroyed. Take the stuff. What do you expect would happen when they call all cops racists and should be defunded? The national murder rates increase last year is the worst it has ever been. It is up 36.7% in 57 cities across the United States. Why is crime spiking all over the country? And it's continuing to rise. Gee, I wonder. 63 of the 66 largest police jurisdictions in the U.S. saw an increase in violent crime, including rape, murder, robbery, and aggravated assault. The left told the American public, to hit the streets and protest because those cops are bad. Get 'em! In some cases, they actually went and bailed out violent rioters. Even our vice president was involved with that. What do you think would be the consequences of the little street war when nobody pays a price? Peter Moskos, a former Baltimore police officer and current professor at criminal justice at John Jay College, summed it up perfectly. Quote, "What the protests caused was a major change in policing. If you want to stop policing, violence goes up." I wonder if that's why when people were stupid and irresponsible and law-breaking when they broke into January 6th, I wonder if that's why those people that were arrested are still in jail in solitary confinement. Oh yeah, they're sending a message. Just like they did by not arresting or releasing people from jail when they rioted in the streets. Did you think possibly by saying all these things, this would be a possible consequence? Police officers are being ambushed and shot while on the job, everywhere from Texas to Los Angeles. And what happens when elected officials not only turn a blind eye, but they also coddle the criminals they've unleashed?
Ted, we are asking for the last time that you resign. If you ignore this message outright, the destruction to your precious way of life is going to escalate. Blood is already on your hands, Ted, but next time, it may just be your own.
So that was Portland's Antifa calling for the removal of Mayor Ted Wheeler. But they didn't ask for a vote. They're telling him get out or you'll die. We blurred the contact information they displayed at the end, but this is a direct threat towards someone that has all but supported their violent actions in the past. The left has refused to condemn Antifa. Now they're calling for, quote, blood of their own. And consider this. It is damn near impossible to find any videos or comment on social media from President Trump. But this video is still available on YouTube. What message does that send? Critical race theory is being taught in public schools now and universities. Our kids are being brought up to believe the entire American system is racist. Well, what do you expect the consequences will be, where the rallying cry is, you are oppressed and they are the oppressor. Take what's yours. That's what this show is about tonight, and it brings us to South Africa. Why are farmers and landowners being killed in such high numbers and so brutally? A note to the press. Notice I didn't say white farm owners. I'll come back to that in a minute. It's Marxism 101. First, you declare an oppressor, point the finger and unleash people's emotions. Then you come for the landowners and farmers. You don't believe me? Well, let's look at history. It happens every single time. In the early 1950s, Mao killed up to 4 million people. And the very first to die were the farmers and the landowners. This was before the anti-Christian campaigns, the Great Famine, and the Cultural Revolution, which killed up to 90 million people, according to some estimates. The first thing they did was come for the farmer. In the 1930s, Joseph Stalin pointed the finger at the kulaks, the farmers and the landowners, and issued an elimination directive. Quote, in order to eliminate the kulaks as a class, it is necessary to openly break their spirit, does that sound familiar, and resistance, and deprive them of the sources for further existence and development. Gosh, that sounds like an extreme case of cancel culture. The party's current policy in the towns and the villages mark a new procedure for the eliminating of the kulaks as a class. Well, what followed was a widespread deportation and murder of millions of farmers. followed by starvation. It is the same every time. But in the 2000s, Marxist land reform moved from discussion on class to race. But the goal was exactly the same. Let's stop in Zimbabwe first. You know, the country with hyperinflation. Once again, the finger was pointed at the farm and landowners, a large majority of them being white. Now let's go down history lane for a second. Hundreds of white-owned farms were seized by angry mobs. Many white farmers were beaten and killed. Zimbabwe's president refused to hold the murderous mob accountable. After all, justice, racial justice, was just taking place. But what do you not see from the reporting of that time? What you don't see is anyone saying the words white genocide, because there is no alt-right hijacking the conversation. Back then, it was a lot more simple. These were violent consequences to radical Marxist ideas, rhetoric, and policies. It wasn't controversial to call this out 20 years ago, so what has changed, media, besides you? Why is it now off limits to talk about what is happening in South Africa? Well, I think it's maybe due to the fact that the leading academics pushing critical race theory here in America just love to use South African apartheid as an example for the systemic problems we have here in the U.S. Seriously. They want the entire system to come down, and South African land reform is exactly the kind of thing they want to happen here as well. So, of course, we can't talk about that. Of course, we don't want to paint it as a white nationalist alt-right conspiracy. We got to make it into that, not something about Marxism. They want everyone just to accept the fact that everything is about race, except race meaning the white people, not race the black people. And it is racism from white people that is justification to launch wealth redistribution at an unprecedented level. But it's moved beyond insane critical race theory sociologists. It is now being pushed from our own government. The Biden administration's latest COVID-19 stimulus provides $4 billion to help farmers, unless you're white. You can see what they're doing here. Here are the oppressors. Take what's yours. Violent consequences. What else would you expect? We've seen this before, and yes, South Africa is a perfect example. I sadly and cautiously go there next. So Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway, owns Clayton Homes, the largest builder of manufactured housing in the United States. Buffett just said that Berkshire is seeing very substantial inflation, and they're raising prices. And there's nobody else with their finger more accurately on the pulse of inflation in America than maybe him, because the banks are Bank of America is saying that we're going to have what do they call it? Basically temporary hyperinflation. It's going to come and go. It's no big deal. It is real. It is happening. The numbers came out today. We're at 4.2% inflation year over year for April. That's a huge number, twice the number that the Fed was expecting. And that's with all the funny business going on. If you look at the inflation rate and you calculate it the way we did during the Carter years and Reagan years, yeah, that number jumps up to about 11%. At its worst in the 1970s, it was 13 or 14%. We're almost there, and we haven't even started. Gold. Please find out if this is right for you. Time-tested investment that holds its own in periods of inflation and even transitory inflation or hyperinflation. You want to protect yourself and your family? Please call Goldline and talk about investing in some precious metals, not paper, actual metal. Call 866-GOLDLINE, 1-866-GOLDLINE. Check out their $5 Liberty coins. They've got a special on that. Ask them about it. These are the coins I buy. 866-GOLDLINE or goldline.com. There is a real lack of perspective when it comes to what's going on in South Africa. It seems that the only people talking about it are white nationalists or leftists and the American media scurrying to shut down any and all discussion. Above all of it, everybody seems to have an agenda making it impossible to get to the truth unless you know the country, which is why I wanted to have this guest on tonight, Laura Logan. She grew up in South Africa. She's an award-winning journalist. She was with CBS 60 Minutes. She is an amazing individual. She now works for Fox and Fox Nation. I wanted to bring her in and get the reality, an inside look at South Africa. She lived through some of this. Laura, welcome.
Thank you, Glenn.
So the American media and the left have been quick to shoot down all of the questions on what's going on with the farm attacks in South Africa. The alt-right made it kind of easy for them. Do you have perspective on what's really going on, what the truth is?
Well, these things are always complicated, as you know, and the closer you are to them, the more complicated they become. But there's a few things that are very simple and that nobody can deny. And one of those is that South Africa is in the grip of terribly violent crime. And it affects people who are black and it affects people who are white. It affects people in the cities and it, without a doubt, affects people in the rural areas. So no one's pretending that white farmers are not being killed. I mean, you can't deny that. And no one's pretending that it's only white people who are experiencing violence. And no one's pretending that it's only white farmers who are being attacked. But when you look at the nature of the attacks, and you look at the consistency, and you look at the rise of the attacks, and then you step back from that a moment, and you look at it in the context of land invasions and repatriation of land and all of these issues, and you start to see the political overtones that this has, then you see that the truth is that all of the politics that are affecting the United States today, the tactics that are being used to divide this country, the information warfare that slaps a white supremacist label on everything and anything under the sun in order to crush any form of debate or substantive conversation about these issues. That is happening with this issue of the killing of white farmers in South Africa. And what is being denied and lost in the midst of that conversation is that the white Afrikaans people are a tribe of Africa. That's what they are. They didn't exist and they don't exist anywhere else. They don't have roots anywhere else. They were born out of the soil of South Africa. And the fact that they came, from people who came to the country, whether it's the Dutch or, other nationalities, doesn't change the fact that they're the only people in the world who speak a language called Afrikaans. It doesn't, no one else speaks that anywhere. And there's a small number of them when you compare it to for example, the black population of South Africa. And many of them are on the farms and many of them are being killed. And the violence nature, the cruel nature of the violence is something that really has to be seen and understood to be believed. It is staggering.
So we saw some photos a few minutes ago that are just horrifying. Little children being sliced up. And it's to do that, you have to be enraged. And I'm thinking, I've only been to South Africa one time, so I clearly don't understand it at all. But it feels to me the same kind of rage that is being planted into Americans today for the same reasons of Marxist takeovers.
I have to say there are many signs that make me feel the same way, Glenn, because what you're talking about is naturally existing conditions that are then exploited by political operatives with a very organized, systematic, well-funded ideology. And what are the naturally existing conditions? Well, a long time ago, the Soviets identified race as a potential way in to divide American society. They did the same thing in Algeria between the local population there and the French, using Islam as a weapon to divide the country. And they've done the same thing in South Africa. It's very easy to make people angry when they've got no hope and they're poor, and all the hope and the nobility of the struggle against apartheid under Nelson Mandela gave way to what? It gave way to extreme poverty. And the black leaders of the country haven't necessarily done very well in lifting up the country from poverty. Now, that was a tough task to start with, but corruption has been a big factor. And so these are all the naturally existing fertile ground that can be exploited by people. And when you see the kind of people that are active in South Africa, I'll tell you, a few years ago, I was in the middle of nowhere in South Africa shooting a story for 60 Minutes about rhinos in an area that is so poor, surrounded by dirt roads. Many of the people living there have never even been 2 hours to the coast and don't speak English. That's how remote it was. And guess what I stumbled into? I stumbled into exactly the kind of far left, progressive, woke conference that you would find in New York and any city in the United States. And they were teaching people how to install their messages and their propaganda into the media in South Africa. And it was just extraordinary to me. I remember, I really couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe my eyes. This is a place that, barely has water and electricity for miles around, even though it's a very beautiful national reserve. And yet even here, and it should come as no surprise to you that, for example, the Open Society Foundation, their biggest office outside the United States, and that, of course, is George Soros's Open Society Foundation. One of their oldest offices is in Johannesburg, South Africa. So they have a long history in the country. And to think that their tentacles don't reach all over the world means you're not paying attention, because on their own website, they'll tell you they're in 120 countries.
All right, I got to take a break, but I will tell you, Laura, if you were shocked by that, I'll take you to the Navajo Indian Reservation. I don't know if you've been to the Navajo Nation, but it is exactly the same. No running water, no electricity, nothing, and leftists always there teaching propaganda. Back in just a second, more with Lara Logan. First, let me tell you about Relief Factor. If you're one of the millions who suffer every single day from pain, I want you to listen, because there is hope, and it comes in the form of Relief Factor. Every single day, I see testimonies of people who have tried Relief Factor for their pain, and they've gotten their life back. Most of our pain, most of our sickness in our body comes from inflammation. And this reduces inflammation. And I know. I look at the doctor when he says, I'm going to give you ibuprofen 800. Shut up. Why am I going to go do that? I'll take 4 capsules. Okay. That's ibuprofen 800. Thanks, doc. No, thanks. I didn't think that Relief Factor would work for me. It does. And 3 years ago, I think I got my life back. I was in pain every single day, maybe just like you. Please try it. You'll know within 3 weeks if it works. If it doesn't work for you in 3 weeks, stop taking it. It's $19.95 to try. 70% of the people who try it go on to order more. If you want a drug-free, natural way to get your life back, it's Relief Factor. ReliefFactor.com, 800-500-8384. Back with Lara Logan. Laura, I don't know if you've been following the lawsuit from farmers here in America that are not getting any stimulus money because
how could you not,
they're
Ben?
White. Right.
How could you not follow that story in the United States of America, discriminating against farmers who are white? I mean, that's nuts.
It is crazy. I spoke to the farmers, and they're nice people, and they're like, look, I don't have any problem with black farmers or anything else, but this is clearly racist. When you see things like that coming from the radical left, which is now our administration and many members in our Congress, does it, as a South African, kind of chill your blood a bit?
Yes, it really does chill my blood. And you know what I see, Glenn, is that when you look at what's happening in the United States today, we talk a lot about left and right, and for obvious reasons, because right now this is lining up as a left-right fight. But if you look at the Open Society foundations, and you look at the Kellogg Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Tides Foundation, 1,000 Currents, the Sunrise Movement, all of these organizations, their ultimate goal is not Marxism and communism. And it is a global world where everything is about using euphemisms to hide your real agenda. So when they say sustainable development, they mean we tell you what you can and can't grow, we tell you what you can and can't eat, we control the food supply, and oh, by the way, you can have no fuel, you're going to be geographically isolated, there won't be, no one asks with net zero emissions, what happens to global air travel, right? Of course, there won't be global air travel for you and I, but they will still have whatever they need.
Sure.
So we'll be geographically isolated. And these ideas with technology are being, they're being spread or have been spread and actually incubated and really nurtured and sustained all across the world. And everywhere you look, whether it's South Africa or Bosnia or, the Soviet Union, there are activists and organizations, non-governmental organizations that, hide. They use their non-governmental status and charitable status to really hide behind a very sinister agenda. They even use Marxism and communism as a recruitment tool and an organizing tool. But the world that they imagine in the end isn't one that is Marxist or communist. It's one in which a tiny group of powerful people, they control everything. And we are the monitored class. They use the technology to surveil us and control us.
Boy, I could talk to you forever, Laura. I just love the fact that you're a really credible journalist and you know all of this stuff. It's so rare. You are a diamond in a pile of coal.
Thank you.
I know that you are. Thank you. I know that you are tight with military sources. The letter that came out from the retired generals and admirals yesterday, I've only got about 60 seconds for you to answer this.
Okay.
The nation is in deep peril. We're in fight for our survival as a constitutional republic, unlike any other time since our founding in 1776. I don't think they took this letter lightly or from a political stance. Do you?
I do not. In fact, I've been working on this for a while, and I will tell you that anyone who doesn't pay attention to this, who dismisses it as a conspiracy theory, is delusional. And there are some very serious things that are going on in this country beyond the public eye. And that letter is a sign of what is to come.
That's a little terrifying. Laura, thank you.
It shouldn't be terrifying. It should be reassuring.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Well, that is reassuring, although I don't. Anyway, Laura, thank you for everything you do. Thanks for being on the program, and just thank you for knocking it out every single day. I appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you for having me, Glenn. You too.
You bet. Don't you really want to know what she knows about what she was? I mean, wow. Take the warning from our generals and admirals seriously, and what they're talking about is all of us need to be involved locally. There is trouble ahead, and we must be the peacemakers. Blessed be the peacemakers, but we shall never sit down if we are told to stray from the truth that we know about America. More on the show, and General Boykin joins me tomorrow. Don't miss it.